What would you do if you found a dying child who knew your darkest secret? The question hung in the stillness of Copper Valley like the heat itself, invisible, but pressing down on everything that lived. Wyatt Cross had been riding fence line for 3 hours that June morning in 1879, checking posts after the spring storms had torn through Arizona territory. The sun climbed higher with every passing minute, turning the valley floor into a furnace. His gelding, Dusty, moved steady beneath him, ears swiveling at every sound. Then the horse stopped. Wyatt felt it before he saw it. The way Dusty's head came up, the way his nostrils flared. The animal knew death the way men knew lightning, by instinct, deeper than thought. Wyatt gave the horse his head, and they moved forward slow now, deliberate. The air smelled different here, dust and sage and something older, something final. The buzzards circled lazy overhead black shapes against the burning blue. Wyatt counted 4 of them, maybe 5. They had time. Whatever lay ahead wasn't going anywhere. He saw the horse first. It lay on its side in the tall grass ribs, still flies already thick in the heat. The saddle hung loose leather, cracked and sun-bleached. One stirrup dragged in the dirt. Wyatt dismounted 20 yards out and approached on foot, his rifle loose in both hands. Out here anything still could be a trap, but then he heard it. A voice, small and cracked. Not a cry exactly, more like the last bit of strength-given sound. "Mister, please, I'm so thirsty." Wyatt froze. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. He moved faster now, circling the dead animal boots, crunching through dry grass. On the far side, half hidden by the horse's belly, a child lay in the dirt. Not an infant. Older, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Dark hair tangled and matted with dust. A dress that had once been blue, now brown with grime. She had positioned herself in the shadow of the dead horse, using its bulk to shield her from the sun. Smart. Wyatt dropped to one knee. The girl's eyes opened pale blue like winter sky. She looked up at him without fear, only exhaustion. "You came," she whispered. He pulled the canteen from his belt and unscrewed the cap with shaking fingers. "Easy now," he said, lifting her head gently. "Just a little at a time." She drank. 3 small sips, then 4. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, but she swallowed careful, controlled, not gulping, not panicking, smart. "What's your name?" Wyatt asked. Sarah Thorne." The name hit him like a fist to the chest. Thorne. He looked at the dead horse again, really looked this time. The saddle blanket had slipped part way off dark wool, worn thin in places. He reached down and pulled it free. Along one edge, stitched in faded thread, was a name. C. Thorne, schoolteacher. Wyatt's breath stopped. Catherine Thorne. Kate. The daughter of Daniel Thorne, the man whose family had burned to death 8 years ago at Copper Creek Station. The family Wyatt had done nothing to save. He looked down at the girl again. She watched him with those calm, knowing eyes. "Your mama," he said quietly. "Where is she?" Sarah's face crumpled for just a moment. Then she steadied herself. Another smart thing. Grief was a luxury you couldn't afford when you were dying of thirst in the desert. "She said someone good would find me," Sarah whispered. "She said to wait, to stay in the shade, to be brave." Wyatt wrapped the blanket around her thin shoulders and lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her to Dusty and settled her in the saddle, then swung up behind her. She leaned back against his chest, small and warm and alive. "You smell like horses and coffee," she said, her voice stronger now. "That's a good smell." Despite everything, Wyatt smiled. "Well, that's about all I got, little lady." They rode west toward his cabin at Willow Creek. Sarah stayed quiet for the first mile, then she started to hum. Soft at first, then a little louder. A melody Wyatt recognized but couldn't place. Then she sang the words. "In the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore." Wyatt's hands tightened on the reins. That song. Daniel Thorne used to sing it at church back when the Thorne family was still alive, back when Wyatt was 20 years old and too afraid to speak up when whispers started about Marshall Dixonville having a score to settle. "Your grandpa taught you that song?" he asked. Sarah nodded against his chest. "Mama taught me. She said Grandpa used to sing it every Sunday. She said it meant even when things are bad, there's always hope on the other side." Wyatt said nothing. There was nothing to say. By the time they reached the cabin, Sarah had fallen asleep. Wyatt carried her inside and laid her on the narrow bed near the stone hearth. She stirred, but didn't wake. He filled a basin with water and carefully cleaned the dust from her face and hands. She had scrapes on her knees and elbows, sunburn on her nose and cheeks, but nothing that wouldn't heal. Lucky. No, not lucky. Smart. The girl had kept herself alive through intelligence and discipline. That took more than luck. Wyatt set a pot of oats to boil on the fire, thinning it with water until it was barely thicker than broth. When Sarah woke an hour later, he spooned it into her mouth, slowly talking to her the whole time. "You're safe now," he said. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." Sarah ate without complaint, though her hands shook with the effort. When the bowl was empty, she looked up at him with those clear blue eyes. "Mama said to give this to someone named Jack Reeves." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn soft from handling. Wyatt unfolded it carefully. It was a hand-drawn map, crude but clear. Devil's Ridge marked in pencil with an X on the north face. Below the map, in careful script, were the words, "Bring to Jack Reeves. He'll know what to do." "Your mama wrote this," Sarah nodded. "She taught me something. She said if you're lost, leave a map. If you're scared, make a plan." Wyatt stared at the paper in his hands. Jack Reeves. He knew that name. Old Jack, they called him. Ran a horse ranch 3 miles west of Red Mesa. He'd fought in the war with Wyatt's father. Good man, honest man, and apparently a man Kate Thorne trusted with her daughter's life. "Sarah," Wyatt said carefully, "do you know why your mama had to hide? Why she couldn't bring you to town herself?" The girl's face went very still. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "The marshal wants us dead. Mama said he killed Grandpa and Grandma 8 years ago, burned their house down, made it look like an accident. She said if he finds us, he'll finish what he started." Wyatt felt something cold settle in his chest. Marshal Dixon Vale. The name everyone in the territory knew. The man with the badge and the authority and the hired guns who asked no questions. The man who had investigated the fire at Copper Creek Station in 1871 and ruled it an accident even though half the county knew better. Wyatt had been there that morning. He'd stood at the edge of the burned field with his father and watched the wind scatter the ash. He'd seen the blackened timbers, smelled the death, felt the wrongness of it all. And he'd said nothing. His father had warned him. "Not our business, boy. We got our own troubles. Vale's got friends. You speak up, you'll end up like the Thorns." So Wyatt had kept quiet. Buried his guilt beneath work and whiskey and years of telling himself there was nothing he could have done anyway. But now the past had crawled out of the desert in the form of an 8-year-old girl who looked at him like he was something other than a coward. "We're going to Red Mesa tomorrow," Wyatt said, "to find Jack Reeves, and then we're going to make sure you and your mama are safe. You understand?" Sarah nodded. "Are you scared?" Wyatt looked at her. This child who had survived alone in the desert, this child who spoke of murder and survival with the calm clarity of someone twice her age. "Yes," he said honestly, "I'm scared." Sarah smiled, small but real. "Mama said brave people are scared too. They just don't quit." That night Wyatt couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire with his rifle across his lap, listening to Sarah breathe steady and slow from the bed. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the darkness. 8 years. 8 years he'd carried the weight of what he didn't do, what he didn't say. The family he let burn because he was too afraid to stand against a man with a badge. But that ended now. Marshal Dixon Vale had gotten away with murder once. He wouldn't get away with it twice, not while Wyatt Cross still drew breath. The ride into Red Mesa began at dawn. Sarah sat behind Wyatt on Dusty, her arms wrapped around his waist. She'd washed her face and combed her hair with her fingers, making herself presentable. Another smart thing. Looking the part mattered. The town materialized out of the morning haze like a mirage, one main street lined with weathered storefronts. A church that leaned slightly east, a saloon with bat-wing doors, and at the far end, the marshal's office with its barred windows and territorial flag hanging limp in the still air. People stopped to watch as they rode past. An old woman sweeping her porch froze mid-stroke. A man loading flour onto a wagon turned to stare. 2 children playing in the street pointed and whispered. Everyone looked at Sarah, at her eyes. Those pale blue eyes that everyone in Red Mesa remembered from 8 years ago. Kate Thorne's eyes, Daniel Thorne's eyes, the eyes of a family that was supposed to be dead. Wyatt pulled up outside the general store and dismounted. He helped Sarah down, keeping one hand on her shoulder. "Stay close," he said quietly. "Don't talk to anyone unless I say so." Inside the store smelled like coffee and leather and sawdust. Thomas Bridger stood behind the counter, marking numbers in a ledger. He looked up when they entered. His face went white. "Dear God," he breathed. Wyatt walked forward slowly, Sarah at his side. "Need supplies, Tom? Milk if you got it. Some cloth for bandages. And information." Thomas stared at Sarah. His hand shook as he set down his pencil. "Wyatt, what are you doing? Taking care of something I should have done 8 years ago. Thomas glanced toward the window, toward the street, toward the marshal's office at the end of town. When he looked back, his eyes were full of fear. "You know what you're risking. I do. Vale will kill you. He'll kill her. He'll kill anyone who helps." "Probably," Wyatt agreed. "Which is why I need to find Jack Reeves. Fast." Thomas hesitated, then reached under the counter. He pulled out a scrap of paper and a pencil, writing quickly. 3 miles west on the creek road. Big cottonwood marks the turnoff. Can't miss it." He folded the paper and pressed it into Wyatt's hand. "Wyatt, be careful, please." Too late for careful Tom. Wyatt paid for the supplies and turned to leave. He had his hand on the door when it swung open from the outside. Marshal Dixon Vale stepped into the store. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray hair and eyes like winter ice. The badge on his vest caught the light. The gun on his hip sat easy, well worn. He looked at Wyatt, then at Sarah. His expression didn't change, didn't flicker, but something cold passed behind those pale eyes. "Wyatt Cross," he said pleasantly. "Been a while." "Marshal." Vale's gaze dropped to Sarah. He smiled, but it never touched his eyes. "And who's this pretty little thing?" Wyatt felt Sarah tense against his leg. He put his hand on her shoulder again, steady pressure. "My niece," he said. "Emma Cross, sister's girl, came to stay a spell." Vale studied Sarah with the intensity of a man examining evidence, looking for cracks in the story, looking for proof. "Emma, you say?" Vale's voice was soft, dangerous. "Interesting. She's got unusual eyes, real pretty shade of blue." Sarah lifted her chin. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. "Thank you, sir. My mama says they're her favorite color." Vale smiled again. "I'm sure she does." He tipped his hat. "You folks have a nice day now." He walked past them to the counter where Thomas Bridger stood frozen. Wyatt didn't wait. He took Sarah's hand and led her outside, moving quick but not running. Never run. Running meant guilt. They mounted Dusty and rode west without looking back, but Wyatt felt those ice-cold eyes watching them all the way out of town. Jack Reeves's ranch sat in a valley where Willow Creek widened into a series of shallow pools. Cottonwoods grew thick along the banks, their leaves whispering in the afternoon breeze. The main house was solid timber, well built with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Corrals and outbuildings dotted the property, all in good repair. The sound of hammering echoed from the barn. Wyatt dismounted and helped Sarah down. They walked toward the sound together. Inside the barn, an old man worked at an anvil, shaping a horseshoe with steady, practiced blows. He looked up when their shadows crossed the doorway. Jack Reeves was nearly 70, with hair gone white as snow and skin weathered dark by decades of sun. But his eyes were sharp and clear, and when they fell on Sarah, he dropped his hammer. It hit the dirt floor with a heavy thud. "Dear God," Jack whispered. "Kate's girl." Sarah stepped forward. "Are you Jack Reeves?" "I am Child. Mama said to find you. She said you'd help." Jack looked at Wyatt. 100 questions in that look, 1,000 memories. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Come inside, both of you. We got a lot to talk about." The house was cool and dim after the brightness outside. Jack sat them at a rough-hewn table and poured 3 cups of water from a clay pitcher. Sarah drank hers in 4 steady swallows. Jack refilled it without being asked, then sat down across from them. "How long has Kate been hiding?" Wyatt asked. 8 years, Jack said quietly. "Ever since the fire. She came to me about 2 years back. Needed medicine, food. Said she had a daughter up in the hills. Asked me not to tell anyone, so I didn't. Vale's been hunting her this whole time. Not hunting exactly. Watching. Waiting. Kate's smart. She stayed hidden. Moved camps every few months. Lived like a ghost." Jack's gaze shifted to Sarah. "But ghosts can't raise children forever." Sarah spoke up, her voice clear and strong. "Mama got shot 3 weeks ago. We were at our camp near Devil's Ridge. Men came. She made me run. Told me to ride east until the horse couldn't go anymore. Told me someone good would find me." Jack's jaw tightened. "And someone did." "Why does Vale want them dead?" Wyatt asked, though he thought he knew the answer. Jack stood and walked to a shelf near the fireplace. He pulled down a small wooden box and brought it back to the table. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed with age. "Daniel Thorne wrote this the night before he died. He gave it to me for safekeeping. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure the truth got out." Jack unfolded the letter carefully. "But I was a coward, just like everyone else. I kept quiet, and the Thornes burned." Wyatt took the letter. The handwriting was neat and precise. A schoolteacher's hand. To whoever reads this, Marshal Dixon Vale is a murderer and a thief. In 1864, during the war, he burned a Union supply depot and killed 12 soldiers. He blamed it on Confederate raiders and was never caught. I witnessed it. I testified before a military court. Vail was dishonorably discharged, but he didn't forget. And he didn't forgive. He came west, bought his way into power, became marshal, and now he's come for me and my family. If you're reading this, I'm already dead, but the truth doesn't die. It waits, it endures. Find my daughter Catherine. Protect her. She knows where the proof is hidden. She knows everything. Daniel Thorne, October 1871. Wyatt set the letter down. His hands were shaking. "Where's the proof?" he asked. Sarah answered before Jack could. "Where Daddy taught me to read." That's what Mama said. The papers are where Daddy taught me to read. Jack's eyes widened. The church, the old church at Copper Creek Station. Before the fire, Daniel taught school there twice a week. Kate would have been just a girl. He must have hidden the evidence there before he died. Then that's where we go, Wyatt said. No, Jack shook his head. That's where Vail will be watching. If he knows Sarah's alive, he knows we'll go looking for proof. He'll have men there, waiting. So what do we do? Jack stood and walked to the window. He stared out at the valley, at the cottonwoods and the creek and the mountains beyond. We get help, he said finally. I know some good men. Miguel Santos, Reverend Clay, men who remember what honor used to mean. We gather them, we make a plan, and we go get that proof before Vail can destroy it. Outside, a horse whinnied, sharp, alarmed. Jack's hand dropped to his hip where a revolver hung. Wyatt stood moving Sarah behind him. A rider appeared at the edge of the property. Young, nervous, one of Vail's men. Wyatt recognized him. Timothy Cord. Jack stepped onto the porch. That's far enough, Tim. Timothy Cord pulled up his horse 30 yards out. He looked at the house, at Jack, at the rifle Jack now held easy in both hands. Just passing through, Mr. Reeves, Timothy called. Meant no offense. Then keep passing. Timothy nodded and turned his horse. But before he rode away, he looked back one more time. His eyes found the window where Sarah stood watching. Then he was gone, galloping back toward Red Mesa. Jack came back inside. We're out of time. Vail knows. Wyatt felt Sarah's hand slip into his, small fingers wrapping around his palm. I'm scared, she whispered. He knelt down so they were eye to eye. Me too, little one. But you know what your mama taught you. Brave people are scared. They just don't quit. Sarah nodded. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a bracelet woven from horsehair and copper wire. Simple, beautiful. Mama gave me this before she made me leave, Sarah said. She told me to give it to someone I trust, someone who would keep fighting even when it got hard. She pressed the bracelet into Wyatt's hand. On the inside, stamped into the copper, were 2 words, Hope Lives. Wyatt closed his fingers around it. 8 years ago, he'd stood silent while a family burned. 8 years ago, fear had been stronger than honor. Not anymore. We're going to find your mama, he said. We're going to get the proof. And we're going to make sure Marshal Vail answers for what he's done. All of it. I promise you, Sarah. I promise. Sarah smiled. Small, but real. Outside, the sun dropped toward the western mountains, painting the sky gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, Kate Thorne was hiding. Hurt. Alone. Waiting for someone to find her daughter, waiting for someone to finish what her father started. And somewhere closer, Marshal Dixon Vail sat in his office plotting how to bury the truth one more time. But the truth, as Daniel Thorne had written, doesn't die. It waits. It endures. And tonight, in a ranch house by Willow Creek, the truth had found 3 people willing to fight for it. The reckoning was coming. Night settled over Jack Reeves's ranch like a blanket. Sarah slept in the guest room, exhausted but safe. In the main room, 3 men sat around a table covered with maps and plans. Jack had sent word at sunset. 2 riders had gone out carrying messages to men he trusted. Men who remembered what the war had taught them about honor and duty. Men who wouldn't turn away when the truth needed defending. The first to arrive was Miguel Santos. He came just after dark, his horse moving quiet as smoke through the cottonwoods. Miguel was 34 years old, lean and weathered, with dark eyes that missed nothing. He'd worked cattle across 3 territories and could shoot a playing card at 50 yards. More importantly, he'd known Daniel Thorne, had respected him. Jack, Miguel said, dismounting. Your message said it was urgent. Come inside, you need to see something. Miguel followed Jack into the house. He stopped when he saw the sleeping child through the doorway. That's impossible, he breathed. Kate Thorne's daughter, Jack said quietly. Found in Copper Valley yesterday. Her mother's still out there, hiding, hurt. Miguel's jaw tightened. Vail. Who else? The second man arrived an hour later. Reverend Marcus Clay was 61 years old, white-haired and stooped, but his hands were steady and his eyes clear. He'd been preaching at Red Mesa for 20 years. Before that, he'd been a chaplain in the war. He knew how to pray, and he knew how to fight, and sometimes a man needed both skills in equal measure. "Jack," Clay said, removing his hat. "I came as fast as I could." They gathered around the table. Jack laid out everything. The letter from Daniel Thorne, Sarah's arrival, Kate hiding in the mountains, the evidence hidden at Copper Creek Church, and Marshal Dixon Vale, who would kill anyone who threatened to expose his past. "We need to split up," Wyatt said, studying the map. "Someone has to go find Kate. Someone has to get the evidence. And someone has to keep Sarah safe." "I'll ride with you to find Kate," Miguel said. "Devil's Ridge is rough country. You'll need another gun." "I'll go to the church," Reverend Clay offered. "It's on church grounds. Even Vale might hesitate to start shooting near a house of God." Jack nodded slowly. "I'll stay here with Sarah. If Vale comes, he'll find me ready." They worked through the night, planning every detail. At dawn, they would move. 3 separate missions, 3 chances to get the truth that had been buried for 8 years. Wyatt stepped outside as the first gray light touched the eastern sky. He needed air, needed to think. Sarah found him there, standing on the porch. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she said. Wyatt turned. The girl stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her blue eyes grave. "Just for a little while. I'm going to find your mama and bring her back. That's the plan." Sarah walked over and stood beside him. Together they watched the sun climb over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. "Mr. Wyatt, yeah, when you find Mama, tell her I was brave. Tell her I didn't cry." Wyatt knelt down so they were eye level. "You are the bravest person I've ever met, Sarah Thorne. And when I bring your Mama back, you can tell her yourself." She hugged him, then fierce and quick, then ran back inside before he could see her cry. 2 hours later, Wyatt and Miguel rode north toward Devil's Ridge. The terrain grew rougher with every mile. Flat valley gave way to broken rock and steep draws. The temperature climbed past 100 degrees by mid-morning. Heat shimmered off the stones, making the world waver like a mirage. Miguel rode easy in the saddle, his eyes scanning the landscape with practiced efficiency. "How long you think Kate's been up here?" Jack said she moved camps every few months. "Could be anywhere in a 20-mile radius." "That's a lot of ground to cover. Then we better start looking." They found the first sign an hour later. A scrap of fabric caught on a mesquite branch, blue cotton faded by sun and weather, the same color as Sarah's dress. Miguel dismounted and examined it. 3, maybe 4 days old. She came through here. They followed the trail north. More scraps appeared. Small signs that someone had passed this way. A boot print in soft sand. A place where someone had rested against a boulder, leaving the faint impression of shoulders in the dust. Then they found the blood. It had dried to a dark stain on the rocks, already baking hard in the sun. Not much, just a few drops, but enough to tell a story. "She's hurt," Wyatt said. "Been hurt for a while," Miguel agreed. "But she's still moving, still thinking. See how she's following the drainage. There'll be water up ahead, shade." They climbed higher. The ridge rose steep above them, a wall of broken stone and scrub pine. Somewhere up there Kate Thorne was hiding, bleeding, alone. Wyatt thought of Sarah's face, the way she'd asked him to tell her mother she was brave. He spurred his horse forward. The cave was on the north face, hidden behind a tumble of boulders. They almost missed it. But Miguel's sharp eyes caught the one detail that didn't belong. A piece of cloth hung across the entrance, creating shade. Wyatt dismounted and approached on foot, his hands visible and empty. "Kate Thorne," he called. "My name's Wyatt Cross. I found your daughter. She's safe." Silence. Then a voice weak but defiant. "Come any closer and I'll shoot." "I'm not armed. I'm coming in slow." He pushed aside the cloth and stepped into the cave. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the dimness. When they did, he saw 2 figures. Kate Thorne sat propped against the back wall, a revolver in her hand. She was thin, almost skeletal, with dark hair hanging in tangles around a face that had once been beautiful and was now just exhausted. Her left shoulder was wrapped in bloody bandages. Beside her sat an older woman, native, Apache by the look of her. She held a knife, casual but ready. "Where's my daughter?" Kate demanded. Wyatt reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out the copper bracelet. He held it up so the light caught the stamped words. "Hope Lives." Kate's face crumpled. The gun dropped from her fingers. "Sarah?" she whispered. "Is she really safe?" "She's with Jack Reeves, eating hot meals and sleeping in a real bed. She's the bravest little girl I've ever met, and she wants her mama." Kate started to cry, not loud, just tears running silent down her dusty cheeks. The Apache woman put a hand on her shoulder. "This man speaks truth. I speak truth," Wyatt said. Miguel appeared in the entrance. "We got company coming. 3 riders, maybe a mile out." The Apache woman stood in one fluid motion. She was perhaps 55 or 60, weathered and strong, with eyes like flint. Vale's men. You know them. I know Vale. He burned my village in '67, killed my husband, my sons. She smiled cold and sharp. I am Red Skywalker, and I have been waiting a long time to see that man die. Then we better get moving, Wyatt said. He turned to Kate. Can you ride? I can do whatever I have to do to see my daughter. Miguel helped Kate to her feet. She swayed, but didn't fall. Red Sky gathered their few belongings with practiced efficiency. They made it to the horses just as the first shots rang out. The bullets kicked up dust 10 feet to their left. 3 riders appeared on the ridge above, silhouetted against the bright sky. Go, Miguel shouted. They ran. Kate stumbled, and Wyatt caught her, half carrying her to his horse. He swung up and pulled her in front of him. Miguel mounted his own horse with Red Sky behind him. More shots. Closer this time. They rode hard down the slope rocks, sliding under the horses' hooves. Behind them, Vale's men gave chase. The race lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of desperate riding through terrain that could kill as easily as bullets. But Miguel knew the land. He led them through a narrow canyon, then up a hidden trail that doubled back on itself. By the time they reached the valley floor, the pursuers had lost them. They didn't stop until they reached Willow Creek. Kate slid from the saddle and collapsed. Wyatt caught her before she hit the ground. Water, Red Sky commanded. Clean cloth. Whiskey if you have it. They laid Kate in the shade by the creek. Red Sky unwrapped the bloody bandages, revealing a bullet wound high on Kate's left shoulder. It had gone clean through, but infection had set in. She needs a doctor, Miguel said. No, doctor, Kate gasped. Vale owns the doctor. He'll know. Red Sky nodded. I can treat this, but it will hurt. Everything hurts, Kate said. Do what you need to do. While Red Sky worked cleaning the wound and packing it with herbs from her pouch, Wyatt told Kate everything. How Sarah had survived. How she'd led him to Jack. How the plan was coming together to expose Vale and recover the evidence her father had hidden. Kate listened without speaking. When he finished, she looked up at him with exhausted eyes. My father died protecting that truth, she said quietly. I won't let it be for nothing. You won't have to, Wyatt promised. We're going to finish what he started. A sound made them all turn. A rider approached from the south, moving fast. Miguel's hand dropped to his gun, but it was Jack Reeves, his old face grim. We got a problem, Jack said without preamble. Clay went to the church. He found the evidence, but Vale was waiting. They got him pinned down. He sent a boy to warn me. We got maybe 2 hours before Vale burns that church with Clay inside. Kate tried to sit up. The papers, safe. Clay hid them before Vale arrived, but if we don't get him out of there, he's dead. And once he's dead, Vale will tear that church apart until he finds them. Wyatt stood. Then we go now. All of us. Kate can't ride, Red Sky said. I can, Kate insisted. I have to. Miguel shook his head. You ride hard in your condition, you'll bleed out before we get there. Kate's face was white, but determined. Then I'll bleed. But I'm going. Red Sky studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, once respect in her eyes. You are your father's daughter. They rode for Copper Creek. The old church sat at the edge of what had once been a settlement. Now it was just ruins. Burned timbers, scorched earth, the ghosts of a family that had died screaming. But the church itself still stood, wood and stone weathered, but solid. Smoke rose from behind it. Vale's men had surrounded the building. Wyatt counted 8 of them, maybe more inside. We're outnumbered, Miguel observed. We've been outnumbered before, Jack said. They split up. Miguel and Red Sky circled to the east. Jack took the west. Wyatt stayed with Kate, hidden in the trees to the south. Inside the church they could see movement. Reverend Clay, trapped but alive. Vale himself stood in the doorway. Even from a distance, Wyatt recognized him. That straight-backed posture, that casual arrogance. This is your last chance, preacher, Vale called. Tell me where you hid those papers and I'll let you walk out of here. Clay's voice came strong despite everything. I'd rather burn like the thorns burned. Vale shrugged. Suit yourself. He gestured to one of his men who raised a torch. Wyatt stood up. His rifle came to his shoulder, smooth and practiced. Marshal, he called. Vale turned surprised. You want those papers? You'll have to go through us first. From the east, Miguel's rifle cracked. One of Vale's men went down. From the west, Jack's shotgun roared. And from the trees, Red Sky's arrow took another man in the shoulder. The battle for Copper Creek had begun. The gunfight at Copper Creek lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of smoke and thunder and men shouting orders that got lost in the chaos. Vale's men had numbers, but they weren't prepared for coordinated fire from 3 directions. They weren't expecting an old rancher with a shotgun or a vaquero who could put 3 rounds through a playing card at 50 yards, and they definitely weren't expecting Red Sky Walker. The Apache woman moved through the ruins like smoke, her bow singing. She didn't kill. That wasn't her purpose. But 3 of Vale's men went down with arrows through their shoulders or thighs, screaming and out of the fight. The others broke and ran. Vale himself stayed in the doorway of the church using the frame for cover. His revolver barked twice, 3 times. A bullet splintered wood inches from Wyatt's head. Then Reverend Clay appeared behind Vale, swinging a heavy wooden cross like a club. It caught the marshal across the back of his shoulders. Vale staggered forward, dropping his gun. Before he could recover, Jack was on him, the shotgun pressed against his spine. "Don't move," Jack said quietly. "I survived Antietam. Killing 1 more man won't trouble my sleep." Vale froze. Miguel and Red Sky rounded up the wounded. Wyatt helped Kate into the church where Clay waited, holding a leather satchel. "The evidence?" Wyatt asked. Clay nodded. "Everything. Military court records, letters Vale wrote to his accomplices, a map showing where he buried the gold he stole from that supply depot." He looked at Kate. "Your father was meticulous. He documented everything." Kate took the satchel with shaking hands. "Then we finish this. Now. Today. In front of everyone." They bound Vale's hands with rope and put him on a horse. The wounded men were tied as well, though more gently. Red Sky tended their injuries with the same herbs she'd used on Kate. "Why help them?" Miguel asked. "Because we are not animals," Red Sky said simply. "We do what is right, not what is easy." The sun climbed toward noon as they rode into Red Mesa. Word had spread somehow. Maybe Timothy Court had talked. Maybe Thomas Bridger had whispered the truth over his counter. Maybe it was just the way news traveled in small towns, carried on the wind, and passed from door to door. By the time Wyatt and the others reached the main street, 60 people had gathered in the town square. They stood silent watching. Farmers and shopkeepers, wives and children, old men who remembered the war and young men who'd only heard stories, all of them waiting to see what would happen when the truth finally came home. Jack Reeves rode at the front, leading Vale's horse. Behind him came Wyatt and Kate, then Miguel and Red Sky and Reverend Clay. A procession of the wounded and the righteous. Thomas Bridger stepped forward from the crowd. "What's the meaning of this justice?" Jack said. "Long overdue." He pulled Vale from the horse. The marshal stood straight despite his bound hands, his face cold and expressionless. "These people have made serious accusations," Vale said, his voice carrying. "But accusations aren't proof." "No," Kate said. She dismounted slowly, pain etched in every movement. "But this is." She held up the leather satchel. The crowd pressed closer. Thomas Bridger brought a table from his store and set it in the center of the square. Kate laid the satchel on it and opened it carefully. One by one, she removed the documents. Military court transcripts, letters in Vale's own hand, testimony from soldiers who'd served with him, a detailed account of how he'd burned a Union supply depot in 1864, killed 12 men to cover it up, and stolen government gold worth $40,000. "My father witnessed it," Kate said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "He testified before a military court. Marshal Vale was dishonorably discharged, but he escaped prosecution because his accomplices helped him disappear. He came west, changed his name slightly, bought his way into a position of authority." She looked at the crowd, at faces she'd known as a child, people who'd watched her family burn, and said nothing. 8 years ago, he found out where we were hiding. He came in the night, burned our home. My mother died in the flames. My father tried to save her and died with her." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I survived because I ran, because I was a coward." "You were 18 years old," Reverend Clay said gently. "Survival isn't cowardice." Kate shook her head. "I hid for 8 years, lived in caves and abandoned mines, had my daughter in the wilderness like an animal, all because I was too afraid to speak up." "But you're speaking now," a voice said. The crowd parted. Sarah Thorne walked through, her small hand held tight in Timothy Cord's larger one. Kate's breath caught. "Sarah!" The girl broke free and ran to her mother. Kate dropped to her knees and caught her daughter in her arms, holding her like she'd never let go. For a long moment the only sound was Kate's quiet sobbing. Then Sarah pulled back. She looked at her mother, then at the crowd, then climbed onto the table where everyone could see her. "My name is Sarah Thorne," she said, her 8-year-old voice clear in the silence. "My grandfather was Daniel Thorne. He was a school teacher and a good man. Marshal Vale murdered him and my grandmother because my grandfather told the truth about something bad the marshal did in the war." She pointed at Vale. "He's been hunting us for 8 years. He shot my mama 3 weeks ago. Left me to die in the desert. But I didn't die. And the truth didn't die either." An old woman in the crowd started to cry. Others murmured, angry, ashamed. Vale's face remained impassive. "The word of a child and some old papers. That's all you have." "No," Timothy Cord said, stepping forward. "They have me too." The crowd turned to look at him. Timothy's face was pale but determined. "I rode with Vale. I was there the night he burned the Thorne house. He told us it was justice. Told us Daniel Thorne was a traitor and a liar. I believed him because I was young and stupid and scared." He looked at Kate. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm done being scared." Another man stepped forward, then another. Two more of Vale's hired men, their faces twisted with shame. "He paid us to keep quiet," one said. "Paid us to hunt that woman and her child," said the other. The crowd's murmur grew louder, angrier. Vale finally moved. His hand darted toward his belt where a hidden knife waited, but before he could draw it, Red Sky's arrow pinned his sleeve to the wooden post behind him. She stood 30 feet away, already knocking another arrow. "I think not," she said. Thomas Bridger climbed onto the table beside Sarah. His voice rang out over the crowd. "I've been a coward too. We all have. We let a man with a badge do terrible things because we were afraid. We let a good family burn. We let a woman and child live like hunted animals." He looked at Vale with disgust. "But that ends today." He reached down and unpinned the marshal's badge from Vale's vest. "Dixon Vale, you are stripped of authority in this territory. You will be transported to Tucson to face trial for murder, theft, and corruption. And if there's any justice left in this world, you'll hang." The crowd roared approval. Vale's face finally cracked. He lunged forward, but Jack struck him across the back of the knees with the shotgun barrel. The former marshal collapsed into the dust. "Get him out of my sight," Thomas said. They locked Vale in his own jail cell. Miguel and two townsmen stood guard. The wounded men were treated and confined as well. By sunset, it was over. Kate sat on the church steps, Sarah asleep in her lap. Wyatt found her there as the last light faded. "It's done," he said. "Is it?" Kate looked up at him. "My father's still dead. My mother's still dead. 8 years of my daughter's life spent running. But she's safe now. You both are." Kate was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you for keeping your promise. For being the man my father hoped existed somewhere in this town." Wyatt sat down beside her. "I should have been that man 8 years ago. Maybe. But you're that man now. That's what matters." They sat in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Around them, Red Mesa settled into evening. Lanterns flickered to life in windows. The smell of cooking fires drifted on the cool air. Children called to each other in the gathering dusk. Normal, peaceful, safe. Sarah stirred in Kate's arms, mumbling something in her sleep. Kate adjusted her hold, smoothing the girl's dark hair. "What happens now?" Wyatt asked quietly. Kate looked at the jail across the square where Vale sat in darkness behind iron bars. Then at the people of Red Mesa still standing in small groups, talking in hushed voices about what they'd witnessed. "Tomorrow," she said, "we take him to the territorial marshal. We make sure the evidence gets into the right hands. We make sure those 12 families know what happened to their sons and husbands. And after that," Kate was quiet for a long moment, "after that I don't know. For 8 years every decision I made was about survival, about staying hidden, about keeping Sarah alive one more day." She looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I don't know how to live without fear. I'm not sure I remember how." "You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." Kate met his eyes. Wyatt nodded. "If you'll have me, I made you a promise. To find your mama, to keep you safe, to see this through. I keep my promises." "The promise is fulfilled, Wyatt. Vale's captured. Sarah's safe. You don't owe us anything more." "I know," Wyatt said simply. "But I'm staying anyway." Jack Reeves appeared from the shadows, Miguel beside him. "We should get back to the ranch," Jack said. "Vale's secure here, but Kate needs rest. And we got planning to do for tomorrow." Kate stood carefully cradling Sarah. Wyatt rose with her, ready to steady her if needed. Thomas Bridger approached, hat in hand. "Mrs. Thorne, we've prepared a room at my house. You and Sarah are welcome to stay. It's warmer than Jack's ranch and closer to the doctor if you need—" "Thank you," Kate interrupted gently. "But I'll stay with Jack tonight, with people I trust." Thomas nodded understanding in his eyes. "Of course. If you need anything at all, you send word." As they prepared to leave, people approached, one by one. Quiet words, gentle touches. An old man who'd fought in the war squeezed Kate's hand. A young mother whispered, "Thank you for being brave when we couldn't be." A shopkeeper pressed coins into Wyatt's palm. "For the little girl, for whatever she needs." By the time they mounted their horses, Kate's eyes were wet with tears she didn't have the strength to hide. The ride back to Jack's ranch was slow. Kate rode with Wyatt, Sarah cradled between them. Miguel and Jack flanked them, rifles ready, though no threat materialized from the darkness. At the ranch, Red Sky had a fire burning and food waiting. She took Sarah from Kate's arms without a word and carried the sleeping child to bed. Kate swayed on her feet. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was gone, leaving only exhaustion and pain. "Easy," Wyatt said, catching her elbow. "Let's get that shoulder looked at." Red Sky cleaned and rebandaged the wound while Kate sat silent, staring at nothing. When it was done, the Apache woman handed her a cup of bitter tea. "Drink. It will help you sleep." "I don't want to sleep. If I sleep, I'll dream. And if I dream—" Kate's voice broke. Red Sky knelt in front of her. "You will dream of your parents. You will see the fire. You will feel the fear." She took Kate's hands. "But you will also wake. And when you wake, your daughter will be there, alive, safe, free. That is what you fought for. That is what you won." Kate drank the tea. Later, lying beside Sarah in the dark, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, Kate let herself feel it all. The weight of 8 years, the horror of what had been done, the impossible relief that it was finally over, and underneath it all, fragile and new, something else. Hope. In the main room, Wyatt sat by the fire with Jack and Miguel. "You meant it," Jack said. "About staying." "I did. She's been through hell. She and that little girl both. They're going to need time, patience." "I know." Miguel studied him. "And if she decides she doesn't want you around, if she wants to start fresh somewhere else—" Wyatt stared into the flames. "Then I'll help her do it. I'll make sure they're safe and settled, and then I'll step aside." He looked up. "But I hope she stays. I hope we all stay. Red Mesa needs to be different now, better, and I want to be part of that." Jack raised his coffee cup. "To being better." They drank in silence. Outside, the desert night was cold and clear. Stars blazed overhead, the same stars that had looked down on 8 years of hiding and fear and desperate survival. But tonight, for the first time, they looked down on something else: justice, truth, and 3 people sleeping peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would bring not fear, but the chance to begin again. The reckoning was done. Now came the healing. The ride back to Jack Reeves's ranch began in silence. Dixon Vale sat bound in the back of a wagon, guarded by Miguel and 2 townsmen. His wounded shoulder had been bandaged by Red Sky with the same care she showed everyone, enemy or not. The former marshal's face showed no emotion, but his eyes tracked everything with cold calculation. Behind the wagon came the others, Wyatt and Jack on horseback, Reverend Clay in his small buggy. Thomas Bridger had stayed in Red Mesa to spread word of what happened, to prepare the town for what would come tomorrow. And riding beside Wyatt, seated carefully on his horse with his arm supporting her wounded shoulder, was Kate Thorne. She'd said little since they captured Vale, just sat quiet, her face pale, her eyes distant, processing 8 years of running, 3 weeks of bleeding, and 1 hour of watching her nightmare finally end. "How much further?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 miles. You holding up?" "I have to." They crested the final rise, and the ranch came into view through the cottonwoods. Smoke rose from the chimney. Lamplight glowed warm in the windows. And on the porch a small figure stood waiting. Sarah. Kate saw her daughter, and something broke inside her chest. Not pain, release. 8 years of holding herself together, of being strong, because there was no other choice, of never letting herself feel, because feeling meant weakness, and weakness meant death. All of it crumbled. She tried to dismount, but her legs wouldn't hold. Wyatt caught her, steadied her, then stepped back as Sarah came running. The girl didn't shout or cry out. She just ran, with everything she had, her feet kicking up dust, her braids flying behind her. They met halfway between the house and the corral. Kate dropped to her knees, and Sarah crashed into her arms. The impact knocked them both backward into the dirt, but neither cared. Kate held her daughter with her good arm, her face buried in Sarah's hair, breathing in the scent of soap and sunshine and safety. "Mama," Sarah whispered. "Mama, you came back." "I promised, didn't I? I always keep my promises." Sarah pulled back just enough to look at her mother's face. Her small hands touched Kate's cheeks, her forehead, her hair, as if confirming this was real. "You're hurt." "I'll heal. Mr. Wyatt found you. He kept his promise too." Kate looked over Sarah's head to where Wyatt stood watching. "He did. He kept every promise." Jack appeared on the porch. "Let's get everyone inside. We got planning to do, and not much time to do it." They gathered in Jack's main room. Vale was locked in the ranch's old storm cellar, 2 armed men standing guard. The rest assembled around the big table, faces serious. Kate sat in the chair by the fire, Sarah pressed against her side, refusing to let go of her mother's hand. Red Sky had re-cleaned and bandaged the shoulder wound. It was healing, she said. But Kate needed rest. Rest will have to wait, Kate said quietly. She looked around the table. We have evidence, we have Vale, but that's not enough. It's more than enough to hang him, Miguel said. Maybe. But hanging one man doesn't change a system. It doesn't fix what's broken. Kate's voice grew stronger. We need the truth told publicly. We need witnesses. We need Red Mesa to face what they let happen. Wyatt leaned forward. You're talking about a trial. Not exactly. Trials can be delayed, manipulated. I'm talking about something simpler. Tomorrow in the town square, we lay out the evidence for everyone to see. We give them no choice but to acknowledge it. Some will still choose to look away, Reverend Clay said gently. Then that's their choice. But they'll make it in the light of day, not in the shadows. Jack poured coffee and passed cups around. You'll need more than just evidence. You'll need people willing to stand up, to testify. We have Timothy Cord, Wyatt said. He already confessed once. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jack's hand dropped to his gun, but the voice that called out was familiar. Mister? Reeves, it's Timothy, and I brought some others who need to talk to Mrs. Thorne. Jack opened the door carefully. Timothy Cord stood there, hat in hand. Behind him were two other men, both looking sick with guilt and fear. Mrs. Thorne, Timothy said, his voice shaking. These are Ben Walsh and Frank Sutton. They rode with Vale. They were there the night your parents died. Kate stood slowly, putting Sarah behind her out of instinct. Why are you here? Ben Walsh, a thin man of about 30, stepped forward. Because I can't live with it anymore, ma'am. Every night I see your mother's face in the window, hear her screaming. I close my eyes, and there she is. Frank Sutton nodded, tears running down his weathered face. We believed Vale's lies, believed your father was a traitor, but even if he had been, what we did was murder, plain and simple. We want to confess, Timothy added, publicly, tomorrow, in front of the whole town. We know it won't fix nothing. We know we'll hang for it, but at least the truth will be out. Kate studied them, these three young men who'd helped burn her parents alive, who'd stolen 8 years of her life, who'd put a bullet in her shoulder 3 weeks ago. Sarah's hand slipped into hers, small and warm. Mama, what did you teach me about forgiveness? Kate looked down at her daughter. That it's not about them, it's about us. It's about not carrying poison in our hearts. Do you forgive them? The room was silent. Everyone waited. Kate looked at the three men. I don't know if I can forgive. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can give you the chance to do the right thing now. If you're willing to testify tomorrow to tell everything you know, then you're helping deliver justice. That's something. Timothy's shoulders shook with relief. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. After they left, another visitor arrived. An old woman, bent with age, supported by two younger women. Jack helped them inside. Mrs. Thorne? The old woman said, her voice quavering. My name is Eleanor Miller. I believe you have evidence about my son. Kate's breath caught. Corporal James Miller. Yes, they told me he died in the war. A hero, they said. Is that true? Kate pulled the documents from the leather satchel. She found the page listing the 12 soldiers. There, fourth from the top, Corporal James Miller, age 22, killed in the line of duty. Mrs. Miller, your son was murdered, but he died trying to stop a crime. That makes him a hero, a real one. The old woman took the paper with shaking hands. She stared at her son's name for a long moment, then pressed the document to her chest. 15 years, she whispered. 15 years, I've wondered why they wouldn't tell me more, why the details were always vague. She looked up at Kate with fierce eyes. I want to speak tomorrow. I want everyone to know what happened to my James. You'll have that chance, Kate promised. As night fell, the house filled with quiet preparation. Jack and Miguel cleaned weapons more out of habit than necessity. Reverend Clay wrote notes for what he'd say tomorrow. Wyatt organized the evidence into clear piles, making sure every document was easy to read, easy to understand. And in the corner, Red Sky Walker sat with Kate and Sarah telling stories. When I was young, Red Sky said, her voice soft, my people believed that truth was like water. You could dam it up, divert it, try to control it, but eventually it would find its way. Water always does. Is that why you helped us? Sarah asked. I helped because Vale took everything from me, my husband, my sons, my village. But killing him wouldn't bring them back. Making sure he faced justice, making sure his crimes were known, that honors their memory. Kate reached out and took Red Sky's hand. Thank you for saving my life, for helping us. Red Sky squeezed back. We save each other. That's how it works. Later, after Sarah fell asleep on a pile of blankets, Kate stood on the porch with Wyatt. The night was cool and clear, stars bright overhead. Are you scared about tomorrow? Wyatt asked. Terrified? You don't have to do this. We could just turn Vale over to the territorial marshal. Let the courts handle it. Kate shook her head. Courts can be bought. Judges can be influenced. But 80 people hearing the truth at the same time, that's harder to corrupt. What if they don't care? What if they hear everything and still choose Vale's version? Then at least I'll know I tried. At least Sarah will grow up knowing her mother didn't stay silent. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Your father would be proud of you. Would he? I hid for 8 years. You survived for 8 years. You kept his granddaughter safe. You preserved the evidence he died protecting. That took more strength than fighting ever could. Kate leaned against the porch rail looking out at the dark landscape. When I was hiding in those caves, I used to imagine this moment. When Vale would finally face justice, I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. But mostly I just feel tired. Ill. That's because you've been carrying this alone for too long. Tomorrow you won't be alone. All of us will be standing with you. The whole town will be watching. And if the town chooses to look away, then we'll know what kind of place Red Mesa is, and we'll decide what to do from there. Sarah appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I can't sleep. Too many thoughts. Kate pulled her daughter close. What kind of thoughts? I keep thinking about Grandpa, about how he stood up even though he knew it would cost him everything. Do you think he was scared? I know he was, but he did it anyway. Why? Kate considered the question. Because some things are worth being afraid for. Truth, justice, family. Your grandpa believed that more than he feared death. Sarah was quiet, processing this. Then she said, Tomorrow when you speak to the town, can I stand with you? Sarah, you don't have to. I know, but I want to. I'm part of this story too. Kate looked at Wyatt, who nodded, then back to her daughter. All right. But if it gets too much, if you need to step away, you tell me. Understood. Understood. They stood together on the porch, 3 people bound by circumstance and choice. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and truth, and the weight of 8 years finally lifted. But tonight, there was just peace. The simple, profound peace of being together, of being safe. Inside, Jack was telling Miguel a story about the war. Red Sky sat by the fire mending a tear in Sarah's dress. Reverend Clay read his Bible by lamplight, his lips moving in silent prayer. A family assembled from broken pieces and shared purpose. Get some rest, Wyatt said finally. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Kate nodded but didn't move. She wanted to hold this moment a little longer, this feeling of rightness, of standing on the edge of something important with people who wouldn't let her fall. Wyatt, yeah. After tomorrow, after all this is done, will you stay in Red Mesa? He looked at her, surprise and hope mixing on his face. Are you asking me to? I'm saying there's room in my life, in Sarah's life, if you want to be there. Wyatt's smile was slow but genuine. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. Sarah yawned hugely. Does this mean Mr. Wyatt is going to be my pa? Sarah? Kate's face flushed, but Wyatt just laughed. That depends on your ma, little one, and on you. Would you want that? Sarah pretended to think about it very seriously. Well, you did save my life, and you keep your promises, and you're teaching me to ride better, so yes, I suppose that would be acceptable. Acceptable, Wyatt repeated, grinning. High praise indeed. They went inside, and Kate tucked Sarah into bed. As she pulled the blanket up, Sarah grabbed her hand. Mama, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we stopped running. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. In the storm cellar, Dixon Vale sat in darkness, his wounded shoulder throbbing. He could hear voices from the house above. Laughter, the sound of family and friendship. It made him sick. But he wasn't beaten yet. He had friends. Powerful friends. They'd get him out of this. They had to, because if they didn't, if the truth really did come out, it wouldn't just destroy him. It would destroy them all. And powerful men didn't let that happen without a fight. Morning came cold and clear. They loaded Vale into the wagon just after sunrise. The former marshal looked smaller, somehow diminished by captivity, and the certainty of judgment. Kate dressed carefully in the only good dress she owned, one that the women of Red Mesa had given her when she first arrived at Jack's ranch. Sarah wore her blue dress cleaned and mended. Before they left, Kate stood before the small mirror in the guest room and looked at herself. 27 years old, too thin, scarred, exhausted, but alive and ready. Red Sky appeared in the doorway. You look like a warrior. I feel like a scared girl playing dress-up. Warriors are allowed to be scared. That's what makes the fighting mean something. Kate turned from the mirror. Will you stand with me today when I speak? I will stand with you always. You are my sister now, in all the ways that matter. They embraced 2 women who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. Outside, the wagon was ready. The horses were saddled. The sun climbed higher, promising a warm day despite the winter season. Jack checked his rifle one last time. Miguel adjusted the ropes, holding Vale. Reverend Clay climbed into his buggy, and Wyatt helped Kate and Sarah onto his horse, the three of them riding together toward Red Mesa, and whatever judgment waited there. The town would have its day of reckoning. The truth would have its moment in the sun. And Kate Thorne, survivor of 8 years in the wilderness, would finally speak the words that had been building inside her since the night her parents died. Not for revenge, for justice, for her daughter. For every family that had suffered in silence because they were too afraid to stand against power. The ride to Red Mesa took 2 hours, and with every mile Kate felt stronger. Ready. Finally ready. The town square of Red Mesa filled slowly through the morning hours. They came on foot and on horseback. In wagons and alone, old men who'd fought in the war, young mothers with children clinging to their skirts, shopkeepers closing their stores, ranchers leaving their herds. By noon, more than 80 people had gathered in the open space between the church and the general store. A table had been set up in the center of the square. Thomas Bridger's table, the same one he used for weighing goods and making change. But today, it would serve a different purpose. Today, it would be a witness stand for truth. Wyatt stood near the table with Jack and Miguel watching the crowd gather. Kate sat on the church steps with Sarah Red Sky beside them. Reverend Clay moved through the people, greeting them, thanking them for coming. Dixon Vale sat bound to a chair near the marshal's office. 2 men guarded him. His shoulder was bandaged where Red Sky's arrow had pierced him. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes tracked every movement in the square. Timothy Cord stood apart from everyone, alone with his conscience. He'd asked to speak, to confess. Thomas Bridger had agreed, though some in the crowd muttered that a man who helped murder shouldn't be allowed mercy. But that was for the law to decide. Today was about truth. Thomas Bridger climbed onto a wooden crate so everyone could see him. He raised his hands, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "Friends and neighbors," he began, "we're here today because of a great wrong, a wrong that happened 8 years ago, a wrong that too many of us knew about and did nothing to stop." Heads dropped, feet shuffled. The shame hung thick in the air. "Daniel Thorne was a good man," Thomas continued. "A teacher, a father, a veteran who served his country with honor. In 1871, his home burned. The marshal at the time ruled it an accident. But we all knew better, didn't we? We knew, and we stayed silent." An old woman in the crowd spoke up. "We were afraid." "We were cowards," a man corrected. "Let's call it what it was." Thomas nodded. "Maybe. But that changes today. Today we stop being afraid. Today we stand for what's right, no matter the cost." He gestured to Kate. "Mrs. Thorne, would you come forward?" Kate stood slowly, her wounded shoulder making the movement painful. Sarah started to follow, but Kate shook her head gently. "Stay with Red Sky, sweetheart. I'll be right there." Sarah nodded, though her small hand gripped Red Sky's tightly. Kate walked to the table. The crowd parted for her, and as she passed, people reached out, touching her arm, her shoulder, silent gestures of support and apology. She climbed onto the crate beside Thomas. For a moment, she just looked at the assembled townspeople, people who'd watched her family die, people who'd let her live like an animal in the wilderness for 8 years, people who were finally ready to make it right. "My name is Catherine Thorne," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "My father was Daniel Thorne. My mother was Mary Thorne. 8 years ago, Marshal Dixon Vale murdered them both." A ripple went through the crowd. Some gasped. Others nodded. They'd known, but hearing it said aloud was different. Truth spoken had weight. Kate continued. "My father witnessed a crime during the war. A terrible crime. Marshal Vale burned a Union supply depot in 1864. He killed 12 soldiers to cover it up. He stole $40,000 in government gold. My father testified against him at a military court." She reached down and picked up the leather satchel. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My father documented everything, every detail, every name, every piece of evidence. He knew Vale would come for him eventually. So he made sure the truth would survive even if he didn't." One by one, Kate removed the documents. Military court transcripts. She held them up so the crowd could see the official seals, the signatures, the weight of government authority. "This is the testimony my father gave," she said. "Testimony that got Marshal Vale dishonorably discharged from the United States Army." She set down the transcripts and picked up a stack of letters. The paper was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear. "These are letters Vale wrote to his accomplices, planning the robbery, dividing the gold. threatening anyone who might talk. She read from one letter, her voice steady, despite the tears running down her face. To Captain Morris, if that damned clerk Thorne opens his mouth, silence him permanent. We've come too far to let some penny counter ruin us. The gold is buried safe. No one knows. No one will ever know. Signed Dixon Vale. The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Thomas had to raise his hands for silence. Kate set down the letters and picked up the final document, a map hand-drawn, showing distances and landmarks. This is where the gold is buried, 20 miles north of Fort Union. My father copied it from Vale's original before he testified. Insurance, he called it, a guarantee that even if he died, the truth would come out eventually. She looked directly at Vale. You killed my parents for nothing. The truth was always going to come out. You just delayed it by 8 years. Vale finally spoke. His voice was cold and measured. Lies. All of it. Forgeries created by a bitter woman who wants revenge. Then explain this, Wyatt said, stepping forward. He held up a military medal, bronze tarnished with age. The name engraved on the back read, Corporal James Miller, United States Army. I found this yesterday, in the ruins of Copper Creek Station, near where the Thorne House used to stand. Wyatt's voice grew harder. Corporal James Miller was one of the 12 soldiers you killed Vale. The medal must have fallen from your pocket when you burned the house, evidence you left behind. An old woman pushed through the crowd. She was perhaps 70, bent with age, her face a map of wrinkles and tears. James Miller was my son, she said, her voice trembling. He died in the war, that's what they told me. Died a hero. But if that medal was at the Thorne House, if what Mrs. Thorne says is true, then you murdered my boy. She pointed a shaking finger at Vale. You murdered my James, and you let me believe he died with honor. You let me grieve a lie for 15 years. The crowd's anger grew louder. Men shouted, women wept. Children watched with wide eyes, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of it. Thomas Bridger raised his hands again. Order. We need order. Reverend Clay stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, I'm so sorry. Your son did die with honor. He was murdered trying to stop a crime. That makes him a hero, not a victim. The old woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing. 2 younger women rushed to help her, daughters perhaps, or daughters-in-law. A family learning that their grief was built on murder. There are 11 other families, Kate said quietly. 11 other mothers and wives and children who deserve to know the truth, who deserve justice for their loved ones. She turned to Timothy Cord. And there are witnesses, men who were there, men who helped, men who are ready to confess. Timothy Cord stepped forward. He looked like he might be sick, his face pale and sweating despite the cool December air, but he climbed onto the crate beside Kate. My name is Timothy Cord, he said. I rode with Marshal Vale. I was there the night the Thorne House burned. I helped. The crowd went silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Vale told us Daniel Thorne was a traitor, Timothy continued. Said he'd sold secrets to the Confederacy during the war. Said he deserved to hang, but the law was too slow, so we had to take justice into our own hands. His voice cracked. I believed him. I was young and stupid, and I wanted to belong to something. So I helped pour the kerosene. I helped light the beer. And when Mrs. Thorne screamed from inside when the smoke got too thick for her to breathe, I stood there and did nothing. A man in the crowd lunged forward. You murdered innocent people! Miguel and Jack stepped between them, holding the angry man back. Timothy didn't flinch. Yes, I did. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I'm done lying about it. I'm done protecting Vale. He's a murderer and a thief, and he's been using good people to do his dirty work for 8 years. 2 more men stepped forward from the crowd. Former deputies, former hired guns. We helped too, one said. Vale paid us. Told us the same lies. He said the Thorns were dangerous, the other added. Said they'd harm the town if we didn't stop them. Thomas Bridger looked at the 3 confessing men. You'll all stand trial. You understand that— Yes, sir, Timothy said. We understand. But the town deserves to know what really happened, and Mrs. Thorne deserves justice. Kate looked at Timothy, at these men who'd helped murder her family. She should hate them, should want them to hang alongside Vale. But all she felt was tired. Justice, she said softly, means the truth coming out. It means no more lies, no more families living in fear. If you 3 are willing to testify, to tell everything you know, then you're helping deliver that justice. The crowd murmured. Some agreed. Others wanted blood. Then a small voice rang out across the square. Mama! Everyone turned. Sarah Thorne stood at the edge of the crowd, Red Sky's hand on her shoulder. On her, the 8-year-old girl looked impossibly small against the backdrop of angry adults. But she walked forward with her head high. Sarah, you don't have to— Kate started. Yes, I do. Sarah climbed onto the crate. Someone handed her a wooden box to stand on so she could be seen. For a long moment she just looked at the crowd, at faces of people she didn't know, people who'd failed her family, people who were trying to make it right. "My name is Sarah Thorne," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "I'm 8 years old. I never met my grandpa or my grandma. They died before I was born. Mama told me about them. She said Grandpa taught school. She said Grandma made the best bread in the whole territory. She said they loved each other, and they loved her, and they would have loved me, too." Tears streamed down faces in the crowd. "Mama said we had to hide because bad men wanted to hurt us. I didn't understand at first. I was just a baby. But I learned. I learned to be quiet, to stay hidden, to never light a fire during the day because smoke gives you away." She looked at Vale. "The marshal there, he's the bad man Mama was hiding from. 3 weeks ago his men found our camp. They shot Mama. She told me to run, to get on the horse and ride until it couldn't go any more. So I did." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "The horse died in Copper Valley. I thought I was going to die too. But I remembered what Mama taught me. Stay calm. Stay in the shade. Wait for help." And help came. She looked at Wyatt. "Mr. Cross found me. He gave me water. He brought me to Mr. Reeves. He promised to find Mama, and he kept that promise." Turning back to the crowd, Sarah continued, "My grandpa died telling the truth. Mama lived 8 years in hiding, protecting the truth. I almost died in the desert because of the truth. But the truth matters. It has to matter. Otherwise, what did Grandpa die for? What did Mama suffer for?" The square was silent. Even Vale had stopped sneering. "The marshal is a bad man," Sarah said simply. "He killed people. He stole. He lied. And he needs to be punished. Not because I want revenge, but because that's what justice is. You do wrong, you face the consequences." She climbed down from the box. Kate swept her into her arms, holding her daughter tight. Thomas Bridger had to wipe his eyes before he could speak. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said quietly. Then louder, "Is there anyone here who doubts what we've heard today? Anyone who thinks Mrs. Thorne and her daughter are lying?" Silence. "Then I ask you all to bear witness. You've heard the evidence. You've heard the confessions. You've heard from an 8-year-old girl who's lived her whole life in fear because we all of us were too afraid to stand up." He walked over to Vale. "Dixon Vale, by the authority vested in me as head of the Red Mesa Town Council, I strip you of your badge and your authority." Thomas reached down and unpinned the marshal's star from Vale's vest. The metal caught the sunlight, winking once before Thomas dropped it in the dirt. "You will be transported to Tucson to face trial for murder, theft, and corruption. May God have mercy on your soul, because this territory won't." Vale finally showed emotion. Rage twisted his face. "You're all fools. You think this ends with me? I have friends, powerful friends. They'll destroy this pathetic little town. They'll burn it the way I burned the Thorns." "No," Jack Reeves said, stepping forward. "They won't, because everyone here today is a witness. Every person in this square heard your confession, heard you threaten to burn the town. That makes 80 witnesses to terrorism and threats of violence." Miguel added, "And we've already sent writers to Tucson with copies of the evidence. The territorial governor has them by now. Your powerful friends can't help you anymore." Vale's face went white. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. 2 men brought a wagon around, a prisoner wagon with iron bars and a locked door. They loaded Vale inside roughly. He didn't resist. All the fight had gone out of him. As the wagon pulled away, heading south toward Tucson and Justice, the crowd began to disperse, but slowly. People wanted to stay, wanted to be part of this moment. Mrs. Miller, the mother of Corporal James Miller, approached Kate. "Thank you," the old woman whispered. "For 15 years I wondered. Now I know. Now I can grieve properly." Kate took her hand. "I'm sorry it took so long." "Don't be. You did what you had to do to survive, and you gave my James justice in the end. That's enough." Other families approached. The names of the other 11 soldiers were read aloud. Some had mothers still living. Others had widows who'd remarried, but never forgotten. Children who'd grown up without fathers. Each one thanked Kate, thanked Sarah, thanked the men who'd helped. And slowly, painfully, Red Mesa began to heal. As the sun dropped toward evening, Wyatt found Kate sitting on the church steps again. Sarah was playing with some of the town children, her laughter carrying on the cool air. "How are you holding up?" Wyatt asked. "I don't know," Kate admitted. "I thought I'd feel different, relieved maybe, or happy, but I just feel empty. Justice doesn't fill the holes left by loss. It just stops the bleeding." Kate looked at him. "That's surprisingly wise for a cowboy. I've been thinking a lot lately about what I should have done 8 years ago, about who I could have been if I'd had more courage. And I can't change the past, but I can try to be better going forward." Kate smiled. That's all any of us can do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sarah play. The girl had been through more in 8 years than most people experienced in a lifetime, but she was laughing now, running, being a child. "What happens next?" Wyatt asked. "I don't know. I've been running for so long I'm not sure I remember how to just live. Maybe you could stay here, in Red Mesa, teach school like your father did." Kate considered that. "Maybe, if the town would have me. They'd be lucky to have you." Sarah ran over breathless and grinning. "Mama, the Bridger girls asked if I can come to their house for supper. Can I please?" Kate hesitated. For 8 years she'd kept Sarah close, never let her out of sight. The idea of letting her go even for a few hours made Kate's heart race. But that was fear talking. And fear had controlled her life long enough. "Yes," Kate said. "You can go, but be back before dark." Sarah hugged her and ran off with the Bridger girls, their laughter echoing through the square. "That was brave," Wyatt observed. "Terrifying, actually." Same thing sometimes. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit throughout Red Mesa. The town had changed today, fundamentally, irrevocably. They'd stood together against evil and won, not with violence, but with truth. And tomorrow, when the sun rose on a new day, they would begin the work of building something better. A town where justice mattered, where the weak were protected, where truth endured. It wouldn't be perfect. There would still be hard days, still be struggles, but it would be theirs, built on honesty instead of fear. And that, Kate thought, as she watched Sarah return in the twilight safe and happy and free, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months passed like water over stone, slow but transforming. Winter came to Red Mesa, gentle by Arizona standards. The nights dropped below freezing, and once in late December, snow fell. Just a dusting that melted by noon, but enough to make the children squeal and the old-timers shake their heads at the strangeness of it. The town had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The most visible change stood at the edge of the square. Where the old church had leaned precariously for years, a new structure now rose. Built from lumber donated by every ranch within 20 miles, constructed by hands that had once stayed idle while evil flourished. Above the door, carved into a beam of solid oak, were the words, "Thorn Memorial Chapel," and below that, smaller but no less permanent, "The Truth Endures." Inside, on a cold morning in January of 1880, Kate Thorne stood before a class of 15 students. She was 27 years old now, still thin, but no longer starving. The wound in her shoulder had healed, leaving only a scar and the occasional ache when the weather turned. Her dark hair was pinned up neat and proper. Her dress was simple, but clean. She looked like what she was, a school teacher. What she'd always been meant to be before 8 years of running had stolen that future. Now she'd stolen it back. "Today," she said, holding up a well-worn book, "we're going to read about the Founding Fathers, about men who stood up to a king because they believed in something bigger than themselves." In the front row, Sarah Thorne sat, with perfect posture, her blue eyes bright with attention. At 9 years old, she could read better than some adults. She helped the younger children with their letters, patient and kind, never making them feel stupid for struggling. Kate watched her daughter and felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, yes, but more than that. Hope. The simple, radical hope that Sarah would grow up normal, that she'd have friends and dreams and a future that didn't involve hiding in caves. After lessons, as the children scattered into the winter sunshine, Sarah helped Kate clean the small blackboard. "Mama, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about the caves? About when we lived up in the mountains?" Kate set down her rag. "Sometimes. Why, I don't remember it being all bad. I remember you teaching me to read by firelight. I remember the way the stars looked from our camp. I remember feeling safe because you were there." Kate's throat tightened. "Sarah, I know it was hard for you. I know you did it to protect me, but I want you to know something." Sarah looked up at her mother with those wise, ancient eyes. "Those years weren't wasted. You taught me how to survive, how to think clearly when everything's falling apart, how to find strength I didn't know I had." Kate pulled her daughter into her arms. "You shouldn't have had to learn those things so young." "Maybe not, but I know them now, and someday maybe they'll help someone else." A knock at the door interrupted them. Timothy Cord stood in the entrance, his deputy's badge catching the light. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, removing his hat. "Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know the territorial marshal came through this morning. Vale's trial is set for March. They'll need you to testify." Kate nodded. "I'll be there. They're expecting it to be quick. With all the evidence and the confessions, the prosecutor says it's the clearest case of murder he's ever seen." "Good." Timothy shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Mrs. Thorne, I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for what I did, for what I was. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but it's all I got." Kate studied him. This young man who'd helped burn her parents alive, who'd confessed publicly, who'd turned his whole life around trying to make amends. "Timothy, answer me honestly. If you could go back knowing what you know now, what would you do different?" "Everything. I'd stand up to Vale. I'd warn your father. I'd do anything to stop what happened. But you can't go back. No, ma'am. None of us can. All we can do is choose better today than we did yesterday. You've done that. You've testified. You've changed. That matters." Timothy's eyes reddened. "Thank you, ma'am." After he left, Sarah said quietly, "That was kind of you, Mama. It was honest. Holding on to hate doesn't hurt the person you hate. It just hurts you." "Is that from one of your books?" "No, that's from 8 years of learning it the hard way." That evening, Kate walked home through the quiet streets. Home. The word still felt strange. She'd been living in a small house on the edge of town, rented from Thomas Bridger for a price so low it was practically charity. 2 rooms, a fireplace, a real bed, luxuries she'd almost forgotten existed. She found Wyatt Cross sitting on her porch whittling a piece of wood. He did that most evenings now, showed up around sunset, helped with chores, talked about nothing important. Sometimes he stayed for supper, sometimes he just sat while Kate and Sarah read together by lamplight. He'd never asked for anything, never pushed, just been there steady and reliable as sunrise. "Mr. Cross," Kate said, smiling, "don't you have a ranch to run?" "Jack's handling it, told me to take the evening off." "How convenient," Wyatt grinned. Ain't it though?" Sarah ran past them into the house. "I'm going to feed Dusty Jr.," she called, referring to the puppy Jack had given her for Christmas. Alone on the porch, Kate sat down beside Wyatt. They watched the sun drop toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Can I ask you something?" Wyatt said. "Always. You ever think about the future, about what comes next?" Kate considered. "I used to not let myself think past the next day. Planning for the future felt dangerous, like tempting fate. And now I think about it all the time. I think about Sarah growing up, about teaching for years and years, about maybe someday not being so tired all the time." Wyatt's whittling knife paused. "You ever think about having more than just you and Sarah?" Kate turned to look at him. His face was carefully neutral, but she could see the hope in his eyes. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Wyatt Cross?" "Might be, depends on what you think I'm asking." Despite everything, Kate laughed. "You're terrible at this." "I know. I'm better with horses than words." He set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "Kate, I'm not a rich man. I'm not educated like you. I'm just a cowboy who made too many mistakes and is trying to do better." "Wyatt?" "Let me finish, please." He took a breath. "You and Sarah, you've given me something I didn't know I was missing. Purpose, I guess. Or maybe just a reason to be better than I was. And I know it's only been 6 months. I know you might not be ready, but I want you to know that there's room in my life, in my home, in my heart, if you ever want it." Kate felt tears prick her eyes. "You're asking me to marry you. I'm asking if you'd consider it someday. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." She thought about the 8 years of loneliness, the nights spent cold and afraid, the desperate hope that Sarah might have a better life than the one Kate could provide alone. And she thought about this man who'd found her daughter dying in the desert and had moved heaven and earth to keep a promise to a child he didn't know. "Yes," she said simply. Wyatt blinked. Yes, I'll marry you, not someday, soon as Reverend Clay can arrange it." "Kate, are you sure you don't have to rush? I can wait." "I've waited 8 years to stop being afraid. I'm done waiting." Wyatt's face broke into a smile so wide it looked almost painful. "Then I better ask proper." He stood and pulled Kate to her feet. Then, to her surprise, he led her down off the porch and toward the edge of town. "Where are we going? You'll see." They walked through the gathering darkness to the small cemetery behind the church. In the corner, under a cottonwood tree, 2 simple markers stood side by side. Daniel Thorne, Mary Thorne, beloved. Wyatt knelt in front of the graves. Then he looked up at Kate. "Your father was a good man, a brave man. He stood up for what was right, even when it cost him everything. I wasn't that man 8 years ago, but I'm trying to be now." Kate's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Thorne?" "Mrs. Thorne," Wyatt said, addressing the graves formally. "I'm asking permission to marry your daughter, to be a father to your granddaughter. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll try. Every single day I'll try to be worthy of them." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," he said. Only thing of value my family ever owned." Kate couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger. Behind them, a small voice said, "Is this the part where you kiss?" They turned. Sarah stood at the edge of the cemetery, grinning. "How long have you been there?" Kate asked. "Long enough, so are you going to kiss or not? All the storybooks say there's supposed to be kissing." Wyatt looked at Kate. "What do you say? Should we follow the storybooks?" "I think we should." And there, in the shadow of the graves of her parents, Kate Thorne kissed Wyatt Cross, while her daughter cheered and the stars came out overhead. The wedding took place on a warm day in late February. The entire town attended. They filled Thorne Memorial Chapel to bursting, spilling out into the yard. Jack Reeves gave Kate away, his weathered face soft with emotion. Miguel Santos stood up for Wyatt. Red Sky Walker sat in the front row, wearing a dress for the first time anyone could remember, and Sarah Thorne, age 9, stood beside her mother in a white dress that the women of Red Mesa had sewn together, each one adding a stitch, a prayer, a hope for the future. Reverend Clay performed the ceremony with his Bible open to Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, love endures all things. When he asked if anyone objected, silence filled the chapel. Beautiful, peaceful silence. Then, by the power vested in me, by the territory of Arizona, and Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife. Wyatt, you may kiss your bride. And he did, to thunderous applause and Sarah's delighted laughter. The celebration lasted until midnight. There was food and music and dancing. Thomas Bridger brought out his fiddle. Miguel taught Sarah to dance the fandango. Red Sky told stories about her people, about love and courage and the bonds that hold families together. As the party wound down, Kate found herself standing at the edge of the crowd with Wyatt's arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good, because it's only going to get better from here." And it did. 5 years passed. The years between 1880 and 1885 were years of building, of growing, of healing wounds that had seemed too deep to ever close. Kate's school flourished. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic. But more than that, she taught her students that truth mattered, that courage was a choice, that standing up for what was right was always worth the cost. Sarah, now 14 years old, helped her mother with the younger children. She was patient and kind, with a gift for making complex ideas simple. She talked about becoming a lawyer someday, about defending people who couldn't defend themselves. Like Mr. Cross defended us, she'd say, Wyatt and Kate's family had grown. 2 more children. A boy they named Daniel, after Kate's father. A girl they named Hope, after the word engraved on the bracelet Sarah had carried through the desert. They lived on a ranch 3 miles from town. Not large, but comfortable. Enough cattle to make a living. Enough land for the children to run wild and safe. Jack Reeves visited, often bouncing baby Hope on his knee, while Daniel toddled after the chickens. Miguel and his new wife came for Sunday dinners. Red Sky appeared when the seasons changed, always welcome, always bringing gifts and stories. Timothy Cord was elected sheriff in his own right. He'd proven himself honest and capable. And every year, on the anniversary of the fire that killed the Thorns, he laid flowers on their graves and prayed for forgiveness. Dixon Vale died in Yuma Prison in 1882, stabbed by another inmate over a card game. Some said it was justice. Others said it was mercy that hanging would have been too quick. Kate felt nothing when she heard the news. Vale had taken so much from her, she wouldn't give him her hatred too. On a warm evening in June of 1885, the whole family gathered on the porch. Kate sat in her rocking chair, nursing baby Hope. Wyatt whittled while 5-year-old Daniel played with toy horses at his feet, and Sarah sat on the railing, reading aloud from a book of poems. When she finished, Wyatt said, "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you remember that day I found you in Copper Valley?" Sarah set down her book. "Every detail." "What do you remember most?" She thought for a moment. "I remember being thirsty, so thirsty I could barely think, but I also remember deciding not to panic. Mama had taught me that panic kills faster than anything, so I stayed calm, waited in the shade, and trusted that help would come." "And it did," Kate said softly. "It did," Sarah agreed. She looked at Wyatt. "You know what the strange thing is? I was more afraid you'd leave than afraid you'd hurt me. I knew you were good the second I saw you. I just didn't know if you'd stay." Wyatt's voice was rough. "I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." "I know. Though I'm not so little anymore. You'll always be little to me, even when you're a fancy lawyer in Tucson." Sarah grinned. "Speaking of which, I got a letter today. From the Girls' Academy in Phoenix. They're offering me a scholarship. Full tuition, room and board." Kate's hand stilled on the baby's back. "Sarah, that's wonderful." "I haven't decided if I'm going yet." "Why not?" Wyatt asked. "Because you're here. The family's here. I don't want to leave." Kate stood handed Hope to Wyatt and sat beside Sarah on the railing. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Your grandfather died so you could have choices. Your grandmother died so you could be free. I spent 8 years running so you could have a future. Don't waste that by staying safe. But what if I fail? Then you fail. And you get back up and try again. That's what it means to be strong." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You really think I should go?" "I think you should soar." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Kate and Wyatt stood in the yard, looking up at the stars. "She's really leaving," Wyatt said. "She is, and it's going to hurt like hell." "Was it the right thing to say, telling her to go?" Kate leaned against him. "It was the hardest thing, which usually means it was the right thing." They stood in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the night sounds of the desert. "Wyatt, yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For finding her, for keeping your promise, for giving us a life worth living." Wyatt kissed the top of her head. "Kate Thorncross, you gave me a reason to be better. That's worth more than anything I ever gave you." 3 months later, they stood on the platform in Tucson, watching Sarah board the train to Phoenix. She wore a new dress and carried a satchel full of books. Her hair was pinned up, making her look older than 14. But when she turned to wave goodbye, Kate saw the little girl who'd survived alone in the desert, who'd shown courage beyond her years, who'd grown into someone remarkable. The train whistle blew. Sarah climbed aboard. The engine huffed and chugged and began to move. Kate waved until the train was just a speck on the horizon. Then she turned to Wyatt. "She's going to be amazing." "She already is. She's your daughter. She's our daughter." They rode home in comfortable silence. Back to the ranch where Daniel and Hope waited. Back to the life they'd built from ashes and courage and love. That night, Kate stood on the porch one last time, looking at the stars. The same stars she'd looked at from caves and canyons and hiding places across Arizona. But tonight, they looked different. Tonight, they looked like hope. Behind her, Wyatt said, "You coming to bed?" "In a minute." He came out and stood beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. My parents, the years of running, finding you, Sarah leaving, all of it. And I'm thinking that my father was right. The truth endures. It waited 8 years. It survived in documents and memories and in the courage of people who finally found their voices. It won in the end." "Just like hope," Wyatt said. Kate smiled. "Just like hope." They went inside together, to the home they'd built, to the children they were raising, to the future they'd fought so hard to claim. And somewhere on a train heading north, a 14-year-old girl looked out at the desert stars and made herself a promise. She'd use her gifts to fight for justice. She'd defend people who couldn't defend themselves. She'd carry forward the legacy her grandparents died for and her mother protected, because that's what love looks like. And someday when she had children of her own, she'd tell them the story. About a girl who was lost in the desert. About a truth that wouldn't stay buried. About ordinary people who did extraordinary things. She'd tell them so they'd remember, so they'd know that courage is a choice, that truth endures, that hope lives. Always. The train rolled through the darkness, carrying Sarah Thorne toward her future. And back in Red Mesa, in a house full of love and laughter and second chances, her family slept peacefully under the Arizona stars. The story was over. The legacy had just begun. And somewhere in the desert night, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the whisper of voices long gone. Daniel Thorne and Mary Thorne watching over the family they'd died to protect, proud, at peace, finally free. The end.